Hey there. So it's been a really it's been a hot minute since I recorded episode 4 with Swoovi. But however, the reason why it's taken me so long to get my after show thoughts out wasn't because I didn't have any notes on it. It's because I ended up in a rabbit hole. And this rabbit hole in particular, it, I was fascinated with it. So I had to do a little bit more. And of course I have other episodes to get out as well. So I finally got this together enough to where I can get this out. So where I ended up with this was the whole concept of nature versus nurture. I had to do a ton of research and ended up with a few thoughts on this, and I wanted to share those with you. So, what does evidence say about genetics and nature and the role it plays as far as creativity? Twin and molecular studies show moderate heritability for creative traits and domain specific artistic skills. Many studies find heritability estimates for, 30 to 60% range for creative achievement or music related traits. And that's interesting. It's probably I don't I guess I don't know if I thought it would be within that same range or not, because I really didn't know enough about it to even speak guess wise on this. So I found that to be pretty darn interesting. And then on the nurture side of this, what does evidence say about experience and practice? Well, deliberate practice matters. Structured, feedback driven practice improves domain specific skills substantially, but it typically does not account for all individual differences. So it's really going to boil down to a little bit of, both of these. I've heard a million times about the 1,000 hours, and there is some truth to that. But this point, I think, really hits the nail on the head, which is it's kind of an oversimplification that it really boils down that you have to have quality, focus, feedback, and the right type of practice. Those things matter than just raw hours, because you can put in time on something and it really not increase your skill level. So I agree with that wholeheartedly, but from my perspective, when I'm putting in those 10,000 hours, regardless if it's, learning a new software tool, or when I took a year to just really hone my guitar skills, it's really purposeful and very specifically driven by what I want to accomplish. And I set goals for where I wanted to be with each of these things. So it was really highly focused. So that brings me to the here and now, which is, yes, I see these things, and I think it's a combination of things. It's yeah, genetics does play this role with Zack, and how Sue and Scott both have you know contributed to his artistic skill, but a lot of it's on him, of putting in the time. And you heard him mention that he taught himself piano basically, and has gotten good at it and stuff, so like that. So I really applaud him for that. And so that was one of my main takeaways from this. Was I just ended up going down a rabbit hole on this whole nurture and nature thing. And I saw, a bunch of different information about this, but what I showed you is pretty much the commonality that I found there, that we could kind of agree upon from experts that know far more about it than I ever will. And so, listening to Zach, I really just felt really proud of him for taking this on, and with such vigor and zest. And as you may or may not know, I developed a lot of tools for kind of evaluating young talent, to try to figure out who's got it and who doesn't. Because I mean, really, that's the name of the game. And not to brag, but I think I've had an incredible eye for talent in the time that I was working the label full time, because I tried to sign the people I really wanted to sign. Not just the people I did, but the ones I kind of went after, or wanted to go after. They're all doing great things. So um, yeah. And the one thing I could say about the nurture piece of this and the nature combination combined with, so it's kind of like you've got, predisposed genetics, you've got, focused, feedback oriented practice in developing your skill. And yes, luck does play a, it can play either a very small role or it can play a very big role. But the fact is, for any young artist that's out there, or if you're the parent of a young artist, um, you can't let them rely on luck alone. It just, it's maybe 30 years ago, luck could had a larger role to play in a lot of that, or probably, I guess I should say, a smaller role, because there was fewer fish in the sea competing, or yeah, however you want to look at that. Today, we're all, competing for that small, which is a smaller piece of the pie. So how do you make up the difference? And the thing I would tell Zach, or tell anybody else, a parent who has a talented uh, young person, or somebody who's has aspirations themselves of making a career out of this, is to take the time to figure out strategic planning. And I am dusting off a whole bunch of things because I felt motivated to kind of reintroduce this. Several years ago, I tried to, just put it out there that I was going to offer some courses in strategic planning. And at the outset, I kind of got, crickets, because I think for multiple reasons. For one thing, unless you've spent any time in a corporation where you are familiar with the concepts that are part of strategic planning, it may just sound like Greek, just some foreign concept. But even if you have heard about it, it's weird, because strategic planning is one of this weird spaces where people will, what's the word I'm looking for? Minimize it to, oh, well, if I just do this SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, well, then I have a strategic plan. No, it doesn't work that way. And so much so that I don't want to give out any names, but on this, but I watched, even knowing my background in IT, and this is something that, I can do like I know like the back of my hand. Even though knowing that, I know somebody who went out and got themselves a template off of Google, and then filled out and this is for an organization that, does somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500,000, and, wanted to call it a day, with no input from anybody else that, would probably should have a voice in at least, saying, well, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense, or here's our input. And strategic planning is much more nuanced than that. It's not just about getting a template and filling out and saying, okay, we're done. Because one, it has to be a living document. This has to be something that you are looking at on a continuum. But what it really means is it helps guide the development of really good habits, and allows you to kind of at least be aware of things that are working against you. And that plan can make all the difference in the world. It is the compensation for luck. It is the compensation for maybe not having, the same predisposition to something. So, yeah, my takeaways from this was, yes, it's going to motivate me to really get busy and try to make sure that I'm putting some stuff out there, some free stuff to help people, but also, I'm also, you know, as the Joker said, if you're really good at something, never do it for free. But I'm also willing to facilitate this for some people, because it is kind of that important. So if you're out there and you're watching this and you're a creative type, and this really doesn't just apply just to music. I mean, this is the artist too. If you do the same things, if you don't like the results you're getting, but your plan is to do the exact same things, you're going to get the same results you got. So you have to figure out, some goals, and then how you're going to, what strategies you're going to use to get those goals, and then what action items you're going to do to achieve that strategy. Those are all very, very important part of that strategic planning process. So yeah, if you have aspirations, and you're a creative type, it's something you probably should look into. I would highly, highly um, recommend that. And like I said, there's different levels of it. And, at the very, one of the things I'm going to put out there here coming up within the next week or so is just kind of an overview and kind of what the minimum of that is. But I'm really encouraging people, especially somebody who is as motivated as Zack is, to get his benefactor and him together and to highly, consider building a plan for this upcoming year. Now's really the time to do it. I mean, it can really mean any 365 days, but usually most people try to do this, during this period. Usually October is a really good, September, October is you want to get started with the strategic planning process and then finish it up really by now. But, it's never too late. I don't care if it's July, you can still set goals for 365 days. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. Zack is a heck of a kid, and I'm certainly in his corner pulling for him. So, get out there and check out his stuff. Check him out on Facebook. Likes cost nobody nothing. You can get out there, you can subscribe to him, you could give him a like, but if you feel compelled to help him out, buy a track, buy an album, just give him a donation, whatever. Help the kid out. Anyway, I'll see you around.